شهر الطاعة والإيمان شهر الرحمة والغفران شهر الطاعة والإيمان شهر الرحمة والغفران
أيامك خير الأيام
يا رمضان
يا شهر صيام وقيام
يا رمضان
أيامك خير الأيام
يا رمضان
يا شهر صيام وقيام
يا رمضان.
سلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. We were discussing the idea that there may be worldly trials and tribulations and burdens and adversities in this physical realm of existence, such as earthquakes, volcanoes, other natural disasters, other burdens, and the result were actions of people. And we said this is not the adhab of type A, which pertains to the hereafter. But we wanted to explain that what is the relationship between actions and the physical realm of existence going against people in the form of trials and tribulations, burdens and afflictions. What is the relationship? When I used to study theology, although I still do, but in those days this was always a question for me. And I had asked many scholars, but it never became convincing for me. Not that those scholars were not speaking in a way that was convincing. You have to appreciate that every person, their inner recipiency of knowledge differs. Some people, they are attracted to certain form of scholars, others to other forms of scholars. I'm not trying to say that some scholars are better than others necessarily, although inevitably that would be the case, but not here. The point is this, that I encountered the late Ayatollah Pahlawani's interpretation. I was never his student, and I only saw him 3 times at his house, but in one of his writings he has given his opinion, and after giving his opinion he said, this is how this destitute servant sees the issue as. Very humbly, he says, this is how I understand it. I, a humble being, this is how I understand it. In his writing he says this. And I want to go through this. This was more convincing for me. And it's a position which is more on a par with Irfani tendencies. So I want to go through this, how the late Ayatollah Pahlawani has described this relationship between deeds and phenomena arising in the world. Okay. First, he goes through, before concluding something, he goes through 2 sets of verses of the Holy Quran or traditions of Ahlul Bayt. In the first set, he demonstrates that this creation, for our purposes, this physical realm of creation, is connected with the truth being Allah, the real. Allah is the real. As we explained before, Allah is pure existence. And this pure existence is real, is everywhere. And he says these creations, different forms of creations, be it animals, plants, stones, gardens, different things that, the air, the atmosphere, water, all oceans, all these are manifestations of pure existence. and they are all connected to one another. It's existence which connects everything, because everything is a manifestation of existence. And since nothing is existence free, nothing is void of existence, Allahus Samad, nothing is void of existence, it's existence which is connecting everything. Now, in this first set of verses of the Holy Quran, he wants to show that it's all existence, or manifestations of it, and that these existing created things, like the sun, the moon, oceans, plants, animals, everything, they are at the service. They are subjected to and at the service of the believers, enhancing the believers in their route towards perfection, perfection in virtue. Although I just remembered a mistake I inadvertently made in one of the previous lectures when I was describing the heaven of action and the hell of action, the heaven of ethics and the hell of ethics. There was a reference I made to non-Muslims, saying that non-Muslims, they will go to hell but the fire won't reach them. What I meant was non-believers, those who don't believe in God, because non-Muslims includes Christians and Jews and Zoroastrians who have to some degree a belief in God, and that wouldn't apply. They may reach high levels of heaven, but I was speaking in relation to those who have no aqa'id or no belief in Allah whatsoever, but they have the heaven of ethics though, but it's the hell of action, because they had no doctrine towards Allah of Tawheed, and therefore these people will go into hell. They can't go to heaven, but Allah said the fire won't reach them. The heaven of ethics overrules the darkness of the hell of action. I'm sorry to repeat that here, but it was a valid point someone reminded me of. Okay. Now, so here in the first set of traditions, there's talk of everything is connected in this realm of creation, and all created things, creatures, are at the service of the believers, so that the believers can reach Allah, so that the believers can journey along perfection in the best possible way. They are at the service of the believers. Let's go through these verses of the Holy Quran which portray this truth. Chapter 30 verse 8, مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ. That the very fabric of everything in the heavens and the earth and in between is real, is reality. One of Allah's names, Haqq, is truth, being pure existence. So everything is connected to one another. Nothing is disconnected totally from something else, because it's existence which is the so-called connecting force. In chapter 2 verse 29, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا, that Allah is one who has created for you that which is on earth, all of it. So it's created for you, in your favor, for you to benefit from. It's all for you. This demonstrates the idea that creation, all things in creation, are at the service of the believers. Or in chapter 45 verse 13, وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مِّنْهُ, and made subject for you to be at your service, or that which is in the heavens and the earth. And it's all from Him. It's all from Allah. A similar verse also exists in chapter 31, verse 20. أَلَمْ تَرَوْا أَنَّ اللَّهَ سَخَّرَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Don't you see that Allah has made subject to you that which is in the heavens and the earth. So Allah has made and has assigned that which is in the heavens and the earth to be subject to you, to be at your service. Okay. So this shows that everything in the realm of creation has been made subject for the believers. They're at the service of the believers with this purpose, for them to reach perfection, for them to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, in the second set of verses or traditions of Ahlul Bayt, it demonstrates what is the purpose of creation of people. When we speak of why were people created, this can be seen in two different ways. One pertaining to Allah, and the second way pertaining to people. When it comes to Allah, why did He create people? The answer is because He's Allah. Allah manifests. If you ask a doctor, how many patients do you have? And let's say he's the best doctor in the world, he says 2. That doctor is not manifesting his inner capacity. He should manifest much more. He's wasting him or herself. That would be a deficiency attributed to the doctor. Allah, is absolute perfection, is pure existence. He's manifesting all forms of manifestations since pre-eternity to post-eternity, including people. But the purpose of creation now pertaining to people is for them to become Khalifatullah. It's for them to succeed in Allah's attributes. Because the more you succeed the divine attributes of Allah, the more Allah-like you become. The more perfection will be incorporated, the more Allah-like you would become. So there are 2 ways you should look at creation. You can summarize this in 4 or 5 words. Being, and being. The first being, with a capital B, it's Allah, who's the only true being. And Allah is being with a small b, is manifesting, moment to moment, since pre-eternity to post-eternity. He has no drowsiness nor sleep. La ta'khudhu sinatun wa la nawm. But the second part of the sentence is in relation to now me and you. What is our purpose in creation? It's being with a small b. It's being with a small b, being with a big B, capital B. So it's being more and more Allah-like. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. But I haven't created the jinns and the people, the humankind, save that they worship me, submit to me, so they can become more and more in line with perfection. وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. Allah has created humankind in the best form. Not only the outer form, but also the inner form, in reaching perfection. So humans are created in the best form. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. People, humankind, have been honored. Also, they've been assigned superiority. وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ. They've been assigned superiority over many creatures. They've been honored, secondary to none. In one hadith Qudsi, a sacred tradition, the Prophet says that Allah has inspired upon him, and then he's using his own words to say what Allah has inspired upon his heart. Allah says, خَلَقْتُ الْأَشْيَاءَ لِأَجْلِكَ. Allah says, I've created things for you, for people. وَخَلَقْتُكَ لِأَجْلِي. And I've created you, people, for me, for myself. Because you can become a Khalifatullah. You have to succeed me. I'm Allah. It's only natural that I have a successor. I'm manifesting moment to moment. But you, humans, are my successor. That's the potential we have. We have that potential because we were created in the best of forms. We were honored We were assigned this superiority. We shouldn't let it go to waste. So, here, the first set of verses spoke of creation being at the service of humans, believers. The second set was humans should be Khalifatullah, should incorporate divine attributes of perfection and get closer and closer to Allah to succeed Him, to be a successor of Allah. Now the conclusion. This is how Ayatollah Pahlawani now wants to conclude. He says, if man acts contrary to their form, to the honor they were bestowed, to the superiority they were given over other creatures, if man wastes this or acts contrary to these, and therefore acts in contradiction to their innate nature, their fitrah, which was calling them towards perfection in virtue, these created beings in the realm of creation, be it the sun, the moon, the oceans, the earth, stones, plants, animals, and so on and so forth, these creatures or creations that were created for man's or the believer's outer and inner development, they will not commit to their side of the bargain, and they won't execute their duty. If man fails in relation to their inner built predisposition to perfection, the effect will be created things will also not act on a par with their duty. We believe that all forms of creation have perception. Be it stones, flowers, animals, sun, moon, there's a degree of perception, there's a degree of knowledge that they have. We believe there's a synchronicity between Allah and His creation, in this sense that whatever exists, whatever is created, whatever is a thing, is in unity with Allah, and thus is manifesting all of Allah's attributes, but to varying degrees compared to other creatures. So these creatures, the sun, the moon, oceans, they also have knowledge, because Allah has knowledge. If you say Allah has knowledge, but this particular creation of Allah has no knowledge exact whatsoever, 0% knowledge, you've attributed sleep to Allah, because you're saying Allah is not manifesting in relation to a particular created being. Now, with the knowledge they have, with the knowledge that creations have, if they see, and they can see also, it's an attribute of Allah, seeing. The sun, the moon, oceans, they see, they hear, they know. If they see man is not abiding by their side of the bargain, which was as a result of the superiority granted to them, the honor granted to them, their potential because of their forms to reach perfection, if they're not committing to this, then the creatures will also compromise on their side, and they will not be at the service and will not provide. And there we see the drawing upon adversities, the alteration of blessings, the sending down of burdens, of afflictions, natural disasters, and so on and so forth. So cause and effect here. But if man repents and returns to one's ways, those creatures will continue their ways and act according to their duty and be at the service of the believers. So for example in chapter 7 verse 96, وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ الْقُرَىٰ آمَنُوا واتقوا لفتحنا عليهم بركات من السماء والأرض ولكن كذبوا فأخذناهم بما كانوا يكسبون. If the people of the city would have belief, have faith in Allah, have taqwa, we're going to open up upon them blessings from the heavens and the earth. But they lie, they fabricate things, and we're going to seize them with what they earn. We're going to seize them with different worldly tribulations. But they earned it. Their actions led to these effects. And this can be an application of Corona too. But here, it's that relationship that we are living with nature. Nature surrounding us has perception. Be careful how you treat it. That's one, how you treat it. And secondly, they are at your service. They have been assigned to be subjugated to you. Now they see, they hear, they know, and if you don't stick to your side, they will go against you. And then if a generation fails, look what a bad inheritance the succeeding generation will have to suffer and endure. And that's the philosophy of Islam when it comes to how to treat the environment. Not only in relation to how to be good with the environment and not to contaminate it, but also the environment is looking at you. Since it's been assigned to serve you, if you don't stick to your bargain and reach perfection, if you don't do that, if you compromise, they will also compromise. Cause and effect. So this was one understanding given by Ayatollah Pahlawani, and that seems to be on a par with Irfani principles. So now coming back to our main discussion of adhab, we've discussed adhab of type A, which covers 80 to 90% of the verses of the Holy Quran. Then there were some verses which, in opposition to adhab in the hereafter, speaks of disgrace, and that disgrace is a result of cause and effect. But now, here we sometimes see adhab used as adhab used, and it's used in the world, as if people are experiencing and are given adhab. And here, at first, it may seem that this adhab may be a punishment from Allah. Or is it something else? The point is, adhab is used in the Holy Quran, and it's not of the type of you sinning but not seeing your adhab, but in the hereafter you see it. It's not type A. This is another adhab where the people really undergo the adhab in this world. And the word adhab is used. Now we have to go through this now and see, because the claim was that divine punishment and adhab of Allah we don't have in this world. Here in chapter 2, verse 49, وَإِذْ نَجَّيْنَاكُمْ مِنْ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ يَسُومُونَكُمْ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ. Recall when we saved you from the people of Pharaoh, who afflicted you with a bad adhab. Look, a bad adhab. And we have a few other verses in line with this. For example, in chapter 7, verse 141, chapter 14, verse 16, chapter 18, in relation to Dhul Qarnayn, verse 86, we have adhab in this line of action. Now, here adhab is used, but what kind of adhab is it? This adhab has been attributed to the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh has ordered this suffering upon the people of Bani Israel. But innocent people were suffering. Innocent women, innocent children were killed. So there's no accordance factor here. But we said intrinsic to the definition of adab is that which is in accordance with, proportional to, appropriate to the inner status of that individual. Those who burn in hell, it's totally in proportion with how they acted in this world. So adab qualifies there. But adab here, these were innocent people. But the Quran uses the word adab. But there's no accordance or harmony here, because those people were innocent. So why are they the recipient of adab? Now, here, the complexities of the Arabic language now have to be introduced a bit here. Sometimes the root meaning of the word, such as with adab, which was that which is in accordance with or appropriate to the inner status of the individual, that's the root meaning. And in the Quran, over 90% of the times that it's used in a framework of pain and hurt and suffering, the type A adab. So it's as if pain and suffering is also intrinsic. It's a corollary of the 90% use of the word adab, the type A adab. It's a 90% of the times it's used, a corollary that, or a necessitation of the adab used in the Quran in most times, is that of pain. And then so the Arabs used adab also to indicate pain and suffering, even if there was no accordance. We have this. We have a lot of examples. I'm just scared that I may bore you with the examples. But the root words in Arabic and their applications and the arising applications that come about, it's a very interesting topic and maybe necessary at times in relation to one's ma'rifah of the Holy Quran. So here we see that adab here means suffering. It's not adab of type A. It's adab used in the Quran, but not the type A divine punishment adab. It just means suffering or an affliction. There doesn't have to be an accordance between the affliction and the inner status. Such as in this verse, chapter 2, verse 49. The children, the women, the men, they were innocent, but they were killed. They were treated unfairly. It wasn't on a par with their inner status the way they were treated by the people of Pharaoh. This type of adab we want to call type B adab, where there's no accordance, but there is pain, there is suffering. Adab has this meaning. So this is called type B adab. Now, here, with this type B adab, where there's just pain, in relation to corona, corona can be said to be an adab for the people in this sense, because it's leading to, afflictions, burdens upon the people. People are suffering, people are dying, and so on and so forth. So in this sense of adab of type B, corona can be viewed as that kind of adab, but not the adab of type A, the type B. But still, we have to pay attention to the cause and effect that led to corona to come, that nature made this corona to come. And if it's of a man-made type construction, the same applies. That man made it to cause this suffering, for example, in the same way that Pharaoh caused suffering upon innocent life. But what's interesting is, in this type B form of adhab, this type B form of punishment, which only entails pain and suffering, sometimes we see there's an accordance factor in hand here. There are 2 or 3 verses in this regard, and they are all in relation to the sentences that a judiciary issues in relation to a criminal's crime or a person's felony. A sentence is issued. A punishment, for example, whipping or stoning, is issued, and the result is those people have adhab, but adhab of type B. Now, the question is this. In these 2 verses, especially in chapter 4, verse 25, there seems to be an accordance factor present. Let's go through the verse. فَعَلَيْهِنَّ نِصْفُ مَا عَلَى الْمُحْسَنَاتِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ. It's comparing 2 classes of women, and for example, they committed adultery, God forbid, or an illegal sexual act, and the punishment of one will be half of the other. But the Quran uses the term adhab here. So adhab is used in the world and qualifies in the world, but in relation to the sentencings offered. But in this case, or in cases such as chapter 24, verse 8, where also the term adhab is used in another setting, involving or associated with sentencing, the issue is, with Islamic sentencing, there is an accordance factor here. This adhab that whipping entails, yes, it's a suffering. It's whipping, it hurts. But this whipping is on a par with the inner status. This punishment is on a par with the inner status of the individual. Because the individual, through a particular action of theirs, they've contaminated their souls. And as a result of contaminating their souls, if they were to be whipped or stoned, that contamination will be relieved, will be purified. And then that person will not suffer in the hereafter. Unless, of course, they don't repent. And I'll come to that in a minute. So, here, this whipping clears that person in the hereafter. That which is important, though, is that there is a jaza factor. There's a recompensation involved here. But it's in this world, it's not in the hereafter. And there is an accordance factor also, because that person had contaminated their souls. This punishment, this worldly sentencing, this whipping, is on a par with what they earned by sinning in this world. Now, the question that arises now is that, is this of type A or of type B? We say it's of type A, in the sense that there is an accordance between their sin and their inner status, the punishment and their inner status. So it's of type A, but still, it's not exactly like type A. A question that arises now is this, that would Allah punish people through this sentencing? In chapter 4 or 25, it was through sentencing. Would Allah punish people through a natural disaster like corona, so that it clears them from sins? That's a question we have to think about here. That people sin, okay, Allah has set a legal system that if all the prerequisites are met and someone sins, then they would have to be punished through sentencing. But would Allah punish and send natural disasters because people have sinned? Would Allah punish people as a result of that? Would we call this punishment? Or do we say that this is a burden, and this burden has adhab associated with it, and the adhab is just pain, burdens, afflictions, but it's based on cause and effect. It's not necessary to clear the inner status, the contaminated status of the individual. It's just cause and effect happening here. In the sentencing examples, it's part of the Sharia. Allah has outlined and says that there are certain sins that if they were disclosed to people, like adultery, homosexuality, and other things, if all the prerequisites and conditions were met, and there are many of them, like stealing, robbery, and that kind of thing, if all they're met, then you exercise the Islamic sentences, which include whipping or amputating fingers and so on and so forth, stoning, depending on the sin. Does Allah bring a phenomenon like corona in this sense to clear you? Or is corona just based on what we explained before, that cause and effect? And it seems it's the cause and effect variation we have to accept. Not that Allah sends corona to punish people's sins, because people's sins is something within. They don't disclose it most of the time. We don't have this philosophy in Islam that you'll be, if you sin, inward sins which have not been disclosed, we don't see this as a punishment from Allah. We just say it's cause and effect, creation will act against you. But Allah punishing you, it's through the Sharia with particular sins, and only when they're disclosed to the public, and it's an Islamic system, for example, it's disclosed, it's come out, and as a deterrent, it's used so that people refrain from such acts in the public arena, and it's a punishment from Allah. And as a compensation, you won't be punished for that sin in the hereafter. But we don't have this idea of Allah punishing you for sins that you've done which were not disclosed. We don't call that adhab. Now, this may raise many questions, and we're going to go through them one by one. What about the adhab to the people of Lut alayhi salam, the people of Nabi Saleh alayhi salam, and with many tribes which were recipients of Allah's divine punishment, and Allah punished them, and even mentioned it explicitly mentioned that this is a punishment from me. It's not just a cause and effect thing, and the punishment was very severe. We'll come to that. We're taking things step by step, but we will approach that also. So here we see that, especially with phenomenon like corona, where it happens to all types of people, and there's not necessarily a jaza factor entailed with everyone, we see that yes, there's something I've written, because they all haven't committed crimes, they all haven't contaminated themselves for you to say Allah has come with a punishment. Many innocent people may die with the corona. To see this as a punishment is a bit difficult, but we can say, for example, well, those who died innocently, it wasn't, but those who were contaminated, that was a punishment from Allah. But as we explained before, to call that a punishment from Allah would be problematic, because that's not the way Allah's sunnah, His customs work. We don't have an example. Then you say, what about the people of old? We'll come to that later, inshallah. Okay, so here, just as a marginal point, that you imagine that, I just want for you to digest the point in more detail. You imagine a thief steals X amount of dollars and all the conditions are met Islamically and legally, and they deserve the penalty, which is the amputating of fingers. If they repented in the hereafter, they're not going to suffer for the action they did, because they received the punishment here. But if they received the punishment here, but they didn't repent for their actions, this absence of repentance will manifest as a degree of punishment in the hereafter. That's one point that has to be mentioned. Also, in the time of the Holy Prophet and in the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, when Amir al-Mu'mineen wanted to execute certain penalties, such as the amputation of fingers or the whipping or stoning, here the people who would commit the stealing or the adultery, they would plead to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam to execute the penalty. They would plead for it, and they would use terms like tahirni, purify me, meaning purify this sin that I've done from the hereafter by executing the legal penalty, the legal sentence. So if someone is to say that these systems of penalties are barbaric, medieval, aggressive, it's because they haven't a good understanding of the hereafter. They may not even believe in the hereafter. If there was no hereafter, which is impossible for reasons I'll explain in a minute, if there was no hereafter, I would agree with them that these penalties are barbaric. But there's a hereafter. The hereafter is a function of your souls. If you say there's no hereafter, you're saying, in effect, there's no soul. The actions you've incorporated in your soul, now you're going to pay for them in the hereafter. You're going to burn, you're going to suffer. We don't want people to undergo that. So those people who have passed a certain threshold of sin, where they disclose certain actions in the public, these penalties are enjoined so they don't suffer in the hereafter. No sound mind would want a creature of Allah to suffer in the hereafter. The amputating, the whipping is nothing compared to the punishment in the hereafter. So this type is a world of this sentencing. It's a worldly adhab, but it's not pertaining to the hereafter. And with a Tawheedi worldview, it's not seen as an adhab in the sense of type B. It's not seen as something which is burdening them. Rather, people with a Tawheedi worldview, like those who would go to Amir al-Mu'mineen and plead for him to execute the sentence, it's a blessing, because it's positive for the hereafter. One will benefit from this, and therefore they see it as a blessing for them, and they won't see it as an adhab. Okay, inshallah we'll continue with this theme tomorrow, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi tahirin.